on Daystar and you publicly affirm their relationship as being of the Lord, can you do that in good conscience without having talking to Lisa to get her side of the story?
I don't care. The great thing about being my age is I just don't care. I've got a good quality of life.
Came on Dayar, and you openly confirmed that their relationship was with the Lord. You should ask Lisa what she thinks before you do that. But can you do it without her? It doesn't bother me. The great thing about my age is that I don't care. Well, I think my life is pretty good. On live TV, no one thought this would happen. Pastor Jimmy Evans sat down with Joni Lamb and the talk was quiet at first, but then it got heated. Within minutes, what he said made the whole room quiet. The crowd was stunned by what he said about Joni, her choices, and what's been going on behind the scenes. A lot of people in the chat were shocked. This wasn't planned. This was honest, shocking, and raw, and it changed everything. No one thought Jimmy Evans would talk. He had been the calm in the middle of the storm for years, the wise preacher who gave the Lamb family comfort, the voice they could always count on, no matter what was going on behind the scenes. He wasn't the type of person who caused trouble or spoke out in public. So, when he finally spoke up, everyone in Dayar and the worlds that followed it were shocked. It all began with a chat that got out. Talk between two people that no one else should have heard. Jimmy talked about a family gathering that had been bothering him for a long time. When someone asked him to do something that didn't feel right, he talked about it. So they could get Jonathan Lamb to obey his mother, Joni, as if she were God speaking to him. It wasn't just about authority or family honor. It had to do with obeying, complete and utter loyalty. Jimmy said he thought about it for a moment, but in that nervous, heavy room, he did it anyway. He told Jonathan that his mom spoke for God and tried to keep the peace, being careful not to make things worse. But the words didn't feel right as he said them. That moment, when he finally left them, was like a weight he could never put down. He was sure that what he was doing was right because it would protect the church and keep everyone together. He knew deep down that her silence wasn't out of loyalty, but fear. Jimmy buried his sorrow for years because he thought it was best not to touch old wounds until now. He didn't say he wasn't guilty when the tape came out. He confirmed it in a cool and humble way. He said he was sorry and that he had helped keep something going that wasn't holy but controlling. The effect happened right away. People who had watched, heard, or supported Dayar for a long time couldn't believe what they were hearing. A strong person of faith, Joni Lamb had been known for many years. Now, though, people were being tough. Was this really how the ministry worked behind the scenes? Was power more important than telling the truth? Everyone was shocked when Jimmy told them what he had done. That man didn't yell or blame anyone. It was clear that he was telling the truth, which was stronger than any lecture. He said he didn't want to be caught in any more lies. Freedom from worry and a chance to be honest for the first time. He broke the silence for no other reason than to get even. It had to do with cleaning and letting light in where blackness had been. Jimmy Evans didn't just show a moment when he did that. He let a system down. That moment was meant to help them heal. That's how it began. With hope, with a quiet wish that the Lamb family could finally get together and talk honestly after all the pain and chaos. There were no cameras, directors, or fake smiles, just family. Jonathan Lamb was in charge of for years while he watched everything fall apart around him. There was a lot of guilt in his family, his faith, and the church his father had built. He didn't call a family meeting out of anger or pride. It came from a need to escape. He searched for the truth. There was no fancy office where the meeting took place. It had nothing to do with business or TV plans. It was about them. He asked everyone who was important. His brothers, their spouses, and family friends from the past, even Jimmy Evans, who had been both a teacher and a guide. Jonathan hoped that the wall of silence that had formed since Marcus Lamb's death would finally come down if everyone was free to say their minds. It seemed possible for a short time. Jonathan felt a little better when Joni showed up. It's possible that she was ready to listen. It's possible that things will be different this time. To tell the truth and not help hide something. Because of that, we are now totally free. Not tied to any big institution or control, so we can speak out for truth and stand our ground. Stand up to injustice and help people who have been abused, had a hard time, or lived in a society that tells people to hide things. We're really happy that we can help shine a light on the darkness and let the Lord clean up the body of Christ. Thank you to everyone who has written to us, loved us, and helped us. It's just been so much to handle." But that hope started to fade as soon as the meeting started. The room had a tight, almost electric feel to it. No one spoke up, but the stress was high, more than words could say. Jonathan began slowly and with respect. He talked about how painful it was after Marcus's death and how quickly things had changed. He also talked about how decisions were being made without any discussion and how the ministry's heart, their family, felt broken. He didn't blame anyone. He only wanted people to be honest. People began to share one by one. Some spoke with a calm sadness while others were crying. They talked about how they felt forgotten, left out, or replaced. Years of hurt that hadn't been said came spilling out. What people had only whispered before was being said out loud for the first time. Something changed when Joni's turn came up to speak. She put her phone on a timer, took it out of her bag, and spoke on the phone instead. She told them all, "You each have 60 seconds." Everyone thought she was kidding at first. She wasn't. 1 minute per person. 60 seconds to unpack years of grief, confusion, and betrayal. The room went silent. People looked at each other blankly, not sure what to say. Each person spoke as quickly as possible, cramming a lifetime of pain into 1 minute. When the last person was done, Joni stood up, looked around the room, and said that everyone there was operating in fear. She then turned around, picked up her things, and walked out. There was no prayer, hug, or closure because she had to catch a flight to New York to see Doug Weiss. After she left, the room was quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Everyone sat there trying to figure out what had happened. The room was filled with sadness, not anger. Jonathan realized that the woman he had wanted to reach wasn't really there anymore, at least not the way he remembered her. Something had hardened, something had changed. What had once been a ministry of love and family had become a kingdom of control. Jimmy Evans, who was sitting in the corner of the room, felt the same way. He would later say that the meeting didn't feel spiritual at all. It felt tense, planned, and almost like a performance. When someone asked him to tell Jonathan to listen to his mother, he froze. He wanted to stay out of it. But in that moment, he gave in and told them what they wanted to hear. That Joni was the voice of God in Jonathan's life and that he needed to obey her. Even as he said it, Jimmy felt regret pressing against his chest. That moment was the breaking point for Jonathan and his wife, Susie. They didn't leave the meeting angry, but they were hurt. As the days went on, things got colder. Calls and messages were ignored and Joni stopped reaching out. People who had once been there for the family started pulling away. They knew things would never go back to how they were. They couldn't keep pretending and couldn't stay silent to protect an image that no longer reflected the truth. It wasn't rebellion. It was survival. They had seen too much. Denise Boggs, a close friend and counselor, tried to help. In heartfelt letters, Denise begged Joni to slow down, listen, and heal before rushing into a new relationship with Doug Weiss. She warned that Joni's pride and haste were making it hard for her to make good decisions. But Joni didn't answer. Instead, she closed herself off to people who wouldn't question her and would only tell her what she wanted to hear. The message was clear: either give in or leave. There was no middle ground. Giving in or leaving started to shape not only the family but also the ministry itself. Jonathan and Susie quietly pulled away from Dayar. They didn't say anything or post about their pain online. They just left because staying would mean losing themselves completely. At the same time, viewers started to notice. Jonathan and Susie were missing from broadcasts. They gave vague reasons like time of rest or family focus, but the audience could tell. The warmth that used to define Daystar was gone, and the smiles looked fake. There was a lack of energy, and people sent emails and messages asking what had happened, but no one had any answers. The family meeting, which had begun with hope, ended with the truth being revealed after years of being buried. It wasn't just about grief or family tension. It was also about power, control, and silence. What should have been a safe place for honesty turned into a line in the sand, and those who couldn't stay had to leave. Jimmy Evans would remember that day for a long time. Everyone was haunted by what he said and the silence that followed it. For Jonathan and Susie, that meeting was the moment they finally understood the truth. You can't fix something that doesn't want to be fixed. The illusion was broken in that room. The perfect Christian family, the united ministry, the shining example for millions, and things were never the same again. Some wounds don't bleed where everyone can see them. They hide under years of silence, fake smiles, and, for the Lamb family, the secret wound started long before the cameras stopped rolling and no one knew anything was wrong. It started quietly, as all tragedies do. Jonathan Lamb never thought he would be the one to find out a secret that would break his heart. To the outside world, he was the loyal son, the calm presence next to his father Marcus, the man ready to carry on the family's legacy. But behind the scenes, his world was about to change forever. It started with his daughter, who was young, innocent, and all of a sudden different. She stopped laughing the same way. Jonathan could not get rid of the feeling that something was wrong. At first, he told himself it was just stress or a phase, but the signs kept getting stronger, and he soon couldn't ignore them any longer. Then he learned the horrible truth. Someone in the family, someone he trusted, had hurt her physically in the worst way possible. It was the kind of truth that breaks a father's heart and destroys his whole world. As soon as he realized it, he lost consciousness. When Jonathan realized what was happening, he didn't think twice or try to hide it. He went straight to his parents, expecting them to support him and protect his daughter. Instead, he found silence and disbelief. Marcus, his father, was the head of Dayar and a respected leader in the Christian world. He listened but didn't say anything. He told Jonathan that they had already looked into it and that there had been an internal review and a few conversations. Marcus said the case was over. The accused was cleared, and there would be no more investigations. But for Jonathan, it was anything but over. He turned to his mother, Joni, hoping she would see what Marcus didn't. He thought she would feel what he did: fear, heartbreak, and the need to protect. But she didn't. She refused to believe him and defended the accused. Marcus, and before they could talk any further, she cut them off. "We've handled it," she said, as if those words could erase what had been said. She didn't ask questions. John. She didn't comfort her granddaughter and wouldn't even look Jonathan in the eye. That's when he realized he was by himself. The betrayal went deeper than the crime itself. They didn't just refuse to believe him. They chose appearance over truth. Dayar was their empire, their life's work. They buried the secret because they thought that if no one talked about it again, the secret would die. But silence doesn't heal. It poisons. Years went by, and the family went about their lives as if nothing had happened. There were family dinners, holiday gatherings, and TV shows about faith and forgiveness. Jonathan smiled for the camera and prayed with his parents, but inside he was broken forever. Every sermon about healing sounded like a lie. It felt like every time his parents talked about family values, they weren't facing the truth in their own home. And that hypocrisy burned like fire. He and his wife, Susie, tried to keep things together because they wanted to protect their daughter and give her a sense of normal life. But what had happened and what hadn't happened followed them everywhere, and they stopped talking about it because it hurt people again, and no one wanted to see it. But the silence wasn't peace. It was pressure. Because he knew the truth but wasn't allowed to say it, Jonathan thought that maybe now things would finally change. He thought that Joni would soften and want to make things right. But they only got worse. Within weeks, she was back on camera, preaching, smiling, and moving on as if nothing had happened. Then Doug Weiss came along. A new face, a new love, a new chapter that moved way too quickly. For Jonathan, it felt like the end. Even though his father hadn't died yet, his mother was already changing the story of their lives. When the family meeting came around later, he still hoped that she would finally listen, that she would hear him, hear his pain, and hear the truth about what had happened years before. But there was again the same wall between them. He was told to submit, to obey, and to accept his mother's authority as the voice of God. The same woman who had ignored his daughter's suffering was now demanding spiritual obedience. That's when Jonathan knew there would be no healing. His wife, Susie, had been quiet for years to protect their family's privacy, but the silence was too much for her, so she started to speak softly at first, then more openly. She talked about how painful it was to see truth buried under religion and how much it costs to stick to a lie. She didn't do it to attack anyone. She did it because someone had to. People in the ministry started to whisper and ask questions. Some, like Denise Boggs, who had prayed with the Lambs for decades, were devastated when they heard what really happened. Denise reached out to her. I begged Joni to stop avoiding what was broken and to choose truth over pride, but she didn't listen. Joni didn't look back. She surrounded herself with people who agreed with her and called her choices anointed. She moved forward with Doug Weiss, shutting the door on her son, her granddaughter, her family, and the truth. The damage wasn't just emotional. It was spiritual. When a family that preaches truth won't face it in their own home, the foundation falls apart. The viewers didn't know the people could feel something had changed. The broadcasts lost their warmth and sincerity. That was the secret wound, the betrayal that no one dared to name. It lived below the surface, behind smiles and sermons, carefully chosen words and edited broadcasts. But it was there, pulsing beneath every "God bless you" and every talk about faith and forgiveness, and it would never stop bleeding until it was faced. There was a time when millions felt like they couldn't touch Dr. It wasn't people watched for comfort, family, and hope. Marcus and Joni Lamb were the picture of unity, smiling, holding hands, and talking about love and trust in God. It looked great, but behind those bright studio lights, something was slowly falling apart. When Marcus died, the world saw a grieving widow holding on to faith. But inside the walls of Dr., something else was happening. Instead of slowing down to heal, Joni